Billy Tarasio with the Modern Divorce Podcast. Welcome back to the show. Today, I am joined by a very special guest, Heather Palaez, one of our attorneys at Modern Law. She is exceptional. She is fierce. She has been an advocate for clients for quite a few years now. Heather, thank you for being on the show.
Thank you, Billy, for having me. I'm so excited. It's my first time doing anything like this. I'm a bit nervous, but also excited.
Well, you know what? It's a lot like court. Not really, but
That to me is so much easier because I'm advocating for someone else. When the focus is on me, I get terrified. So hopefully I'll survive.
you're gonna be so fabulous. So let's talk a little bit. Tell me a little bit about your background, your childhood. What brought you to law?
Okay, so I had this question posed not too long ago, and it was interesting because I was looking through some of my old yearbooks, and the first time I ever mentioned wanting to become a lawyer was when I was in 5th grade. They asked, do you see yourself in 20 years? And I'm like, I'm going to be a lawyer. But I actually didn't go into law until later in life. It's really my second career. I finished law school when I was almost 30, and before that I was in banking, and I've been a lawyer now for over 9 years, 9 years and a month now.
Wow.
Yeah, I fell into family law in my first law firm. I was in a teaching firm that was started by ASU Law School. That's where I graduated. And we got to try all different areas of law. I ended up in family law, I think in my 3rd rotation. I did civil, then criminal defense, and then fell into family law under Stacy Click, Judge Avalar now. She was my mentor for a little over a year, and I loved her. I loved I loved that area of law, and I decided that's what I wanted to continue doing after I left that firm.
Wow. Okay. So I didn't know that you were in banking before law.
Hmm.
I love that you were sort of drawn to it as a child, because I think like so many of us who are in family law are wired in a very specific way where you're just kind of born an advocate. And I think family law attorneys have like a higher, I don't know, calling or tolerance to really speak on somebody else's behalf. So how did you end up in banking?
So that was my very first adult job. I used to work at the mall. I worked at the Limited 2, the children's clothing store. So before that, and then I was like, well, I'm like 18 now. So I need to back up. I did my first year of college early. I graduated high school at 15, went to school and did my freshman year, finished at 16. And I needed to do something else. I had a really hard time after that first year. And so I decided to enter the workforce. My first job was at Blockbuster, then Limited 2. And then I wanted a grown-up job, and I applied at the local credit union where I had a bank account. And from there, I ended up in corporate and became a trainer. And yeah, to go from that to law I worked there and I finished college during my time there. And I just decided, this is something I really like doing. Maybe this is like an older sister syndrome. I'm the older one and was always really bossy. And so maybe that I like the being able to tell people what to do, but also help them at the same time. I don't know. Yeah, I never really did a deep analysis other than that. So
I think it was something that you were always drawn to, right? You were always drawn to, first of all, you're a high achiever and you push yourself and you want to be the very best version of yourself. And I see this with you and your clients. I see you show up 100% of the time fully focused on representing them and their interests. And I think that that's one of the things they love so much about you.
Yeah. And I really feel that when I am with a client, I am focused on them and their world becomes my world. And I take on, and I know this is not very healthy, but I think it does help. I'm learning boundaries, but I do take on a lot of that stress, and I feel what they feel, but I also have the knowledge on how to get them through that. And so when they can let their guard down and trust me, we always have a good outcome. And I obviously I can't guarantee a good outcome, but I noticed that when we're working together as a team, that's when we get, the results we want. But I think we can do that when they trust me and I trust them and I understand what they're going through. And so that's how I approach every client to the best of my ability. So
well, what you're highlighting, I think, is also like the client lawyer relationship in family law is so intimate.
Right. It really is. I know everything about my clients, and it's not really a two-way street. They give so much of themselves to me and trust me implicitly when we have that relationship.
Mhm.
And I never take that for granted. I understand every decision, and I tell them all the time, like, I don't mean to increase your stress level at any point, but this is your life. We need to make good decisions. We need to think 10 years from now, not tomorrow. So we have
Right.
that
And that's
conversation
our
often,
job.
right?
And thankfully, after having so many years in, you have the ability to look back and see if I make X decision, it might turn out in this way for a particular client.
Right.
So, how do you build that relationship and get that trust?
Um, it starts at the very beginning. I like to talk a lot, as you can tell, and I talk very quickly, but I have to learn to pull back and listen. And so I start out every meeting with a potential new client, talking about just my communication style, what I have, my agenda, my view of the practice of law. But then I stop and I'm like, and I always let them know that you've heard that. Tell me why you're here. How can I help you? And from there, just feed off their energy. I mean, that's a really big part of my practice is communicating in a way they communicate. I try to be a chameleon in that sense, and that I try to reach them on their level. I have a lot of clients who sometimes will feel intimidated with the divorce process because they don't know what's going on, or they feel in some way inadequate because either they don't have as much education as a lawyer does, so they are nervous. And I try to make sure that they understand that they can be completely comfortable with me. I'm the one that has their back. I'm not judging them. I really don't. I've heard and seen a lot of things. I'm not judging that client. And then just like I said, meet them on their level. That seems to work.
Can you explain those philosophies? Like what is your communication style? What is the very best way that you like to work with clients?
I like to be task oriented. So that's difficult, especially with divorces in any family law. I mean, there's a lot of emotion involved. So I have to check that a little bit, but then I think that bringing it back to the task does help everybody, I think, manage their stress, control the worry, that kind of thing. So that's my job, is to teach them how to focus on the case. I guess
Right.
that's one of the philosophies I have. Having said that, though, I really try to work on that bedside manner again, and just making sure again that everybody feels comfortable. And even there are times, especially throughout the divorce process, where the lawyer and the client seem to be, butt heads and have disagreements. And I never try to belittle or make them feel any worse than they're already feeling, because I understand that when clients react that way, or maybe say things that they wouldn't otherwise say because of the stress they're under, it's just caused by that stress. And so I try to be understanding throughout every interaction. So,
I'm glad that you mentioned that. And I want to take a little bit of time to talk about that because um as a client, so I've been a client of a divorce, and it
yeah.
was it was so bizarre. It was so bizarre to hand over like my credit card statements. Like
Ugh.
being in the shoes of a client was such a good experience for me. But I also came upon a time where I felt like my lawyer wasn't listening. And it was, I had a heartbreak. Like it broke my heart because it's like you're relying as a client so desperately, like your lawyer has to believe in you.
Right.
And so, but there's also a healthy amount of conflict
Mhm.
sort of needs to happen because you want your attorney to take a different approach, to check your assumptions, to challenge your mentality. So, how would you suggest clients and lawyers handle that sort of healthy, natural conflict in a way that makes their relationship stronger?
To kind of just reiterate, listening is super important, even if you already know you're going to disagree with what the client is suggesting. So I'm going to say it from a lawyer perspective. You still should listen, because even if you're going to tell them some bad news, you need to, again, break it down on their level. Um, I think then also reassuring the client that your goals are the same. You want the best outcome for your client. You know what can happen if like an improper legal strategy is taken, or if someone wants to maybe present an argument that's not supported by fact or law. Understanding, I think if they understand why you are saying something different than what they potentially want out of the case, that generally, that tends to work for me. So getting them on the same page. The other thing that you can learn from that, I think, as the lawyer listening, is maybe you can check your own, strategy or view of the case. I don't know, for some clients, I just, probably most of my clients, all of my clients know their case better than I do as far as the facts in their lives and what they want out of the case. And so hearing those different perspectives, I think helps me, again, shift my understanding or strategy, and then maybe come up with an idea that works for both of us, but still within the bounds of what the family court can do, and just,
Right.
what we know as practicing attorneys, what can be done in a case. So
Yeah. There is a box that we have to work within, and we can be creative within the box. So if you're telling us, something that the court is likely to do will not work in your case, then we have to start thinking about ways to settle, right? We can't just, we have to take what we know to be true and apply it to everything going on in your life and your case, and maintain the relationship. So it's no small feat.
yeah, and just being honest, you cannot sugarcoat anything. You can be kind and polite, but you have to be straightforward with clients. If you say anything that's, not 100% correct, the client needs to know that. If there's not a guarantee, and there's never a guarantee, the client needs to be fully aware of risks, the costs of what it's going to take to get there, and the likelihood of success. And if they fully understand that throughout, I think, again, that preserves the relationship.
That's a great point. And many times I have to check my own optimism.
Yeah, I'm very,
I'm an optimist.
Yeah, I'm the same way, and that's not our job. I know we're in a pessimist really role. And it's not my natural tendency, and that took a while to learn. I think my first year or so of practice, I communicated with people more what I thought they wanted to hear, and what they needed to hear.
Sure.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
what they need to hear is that's what we need to do, obviously. And yeah. And I've never lost a relationship with a client for being honest with them. So,
Right.
giving them,
And sometimes I've had clients who just could not understand, or, would not budge on their ability we couldn't get aligned. And at that point, it's just time to find a lawyer that you can get aligned with, because we can't be effective advocates if we cannot find alignment in a strategy.
Right. If you don't feel like your lawyer, like you said, understands you and has your back implicitly, then you don't want them arguing for you at trial. So yeah, that does make sense. So.
Tell me, what are some of your favorite types of cases?
I really do like divorces, like the whole with kids and businesses and property division, because it keeps there's no boring cases, but that touches everything. So you get to apply all of your legal knowledge when you have a divorce with kids. Love it. Out of kind of the less common cases, I really love grandparents' rights cases. I've done quite a few. My grandmother was my very favorite person in my life. And so being able to handle those types of cases and kind of almost give back to grandmothers, and not just grandmothers, but grandfathers too. I really do like representing grandparents. But then those cases, you have to be careful and manage expectations because of Arizona law. But I do love those too.
Talk about that for a second.
Yeah.
Because there was a potential case that I saw the other day where this person, and I don't know all of the facts, but this person said that dad's rights had been severed or terminated, or he had lost his rights. That's what they said. And so we don't know if that means termination or if it means that they've lost out on parenting time and custody.
Right.
And the father's mother was interested in getting grandparents' rights. And the mother and the stepfather have the child all the time. Now, how would you go about determining whether or not this was a good case for grandparents' rights?
Well, I'd want to talk to the grandparent, obviously. I want to know more about if the father's rights were severed, and if the stepfather then was a legal parent. I think that would, determine whether we could even bring the case to begin with. But some of the facts already, just based upon what you said, seem to align with the statute. And so oftentimes, because I don't see these very often, I'll have my statute with me and we'll just go through. I'll have that with the potential new client coming in, and we'll go through, okay, do you meet this basis? Do you meet this requirement? And we'll go through that? And if so, then we talk about realistically, so you qualify, we can bring in the case. Realistically, what are we looking at as far as what type of visitation schedule you might be able to qualify for? I think that conversation might also go into possibly an in loco parentis discussion, depending on the relationship. Well, not the relationship, but the parenting ability of mother and stepfather at that point. I've had a couple of cases where then it was more appropriate for the child to live with the grandparents based upon the facts of the case. And so we explored even more substantial rights than just a visitation plan.
And those are very hard to get.
Right.
So the grandparents' rights, I think it's just such an interesting issue because the statute is very technical. And if you meet the requirements, you can ask. You qualify to ask for grandparent visitation. And then we've got our case law that really, I think, makes grandparents' rights a huge uphill battle.
Right.
And then in loco parentis is an even harder battle. What are you seeing these days in terms of grandparent visitation?
Most likely, I mean, just the ones that I've gone all the way through trial. The most common one was 4 hours on a weekend, 1 weekend per month. Mm-hmm. Yeah. And that's a really common outcome I've seen. We always ask for more though, and we're always expecting something like that when we go to trial. Mm-hmm. I have done a case where we ended up with in loco parentis rights, however, and grandparents had full custody of the child, custody, legal decision-making authority, parenting time, not just visitation. And in that case, of course, you have that higher burden, but you have parents that are detrimental to the child. And so there is no better outcome than that. But in cases where you don't have that level of the child's at risk, then I'm very honest with the outcome with my grandparents. And sometimes when you're not seeing your grandchild and it's been years, that 4 hours, 1 weekend a month is everything to you.
Right. So, 4 hours, 1 weekend a month is enough to have a relationship.
Right.
And if you have none, then, you take what you can get. We have had other cases where grandparents did end up getting like one overnight a month. And then the other thing is that many times those cases, I think, can settle.
Yes.
And that's really an ideal outcome.
Right. And I would say the majority of the grandparents' cases I've had have settled. The majority of the cases I have in general settle. But when you go all the way, you have to always think about, okay, I'm always hoping for settlement, but my advice is always based on what's endgame look like if we have to go to trial. Yeah.
Always. Yeah. What's endgame look like? I like that.
Yeah.
What percentage of your cases would you say go to trial?
Probably less than 10%.
Nice.
Yeah.
And you love the courtroom.
I love the courtroom. And I tell my clients that all the time. I'm like, okay, so I seem nice. I am nice. I think I'm nice. But I like fighting and I love going to trial. I love litigating cases. But the only person who really always benefits at trial is me, because I'm getting paid and I feel happy at the end of the day. It's not stressful for me. It's fun. It's going to be stressful and expensive, and you can't guarantee an outcome if you go to trial. So have some control over your case if you can. Let's try settlement, and it's always the best outcome when you can control it.
Absolutely. Heather, thank you so much for coming on the show. I have really enjoyed this. Love to do it again, maybe hit another topic sometime.
Yeah.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Billy, for having me. I appreciate this.
And if you all have enjoyed this episode of the Modern Divorce Podcast, make sure to rank it, like it, send it to your friends. If you're interested in working with Heather, she is available for all types of cases, including grandparents' rights and divorced. Just give us a call at Modern Law. Thank you.
Thanks so much for listening to the Modern Divorce Podcast. Remember, anything you've heard today or anything you read online is not the replacement for actual consultation with an attorney and does not create an attorney-client relationship. Even if you called in and we spoke to you, you were anonymous and we don't have your details and you have not become a client of Modern Law. However, we would love to speak with you, or you should seek out the advice of legal counsel or counseling or any other expert near you. And if you have an idea for a show topic or you need to speak with an attorney in Arizona, you can reach me at info@mymodernlaw.com.